This is the Halloween special of Wormhole Wonderland, titled Love. I was as vast as a sky, I was as beautiful as a goodbye. I was as sweet as honey, and soft as silk, because my name was childhood. Wonderful day, wonderful night, wonderful in the afternoon light. Skybound, sea-bound, bound to another, I left it all, and the oil grasped my face. Long, long ago, in my world, there was a tale of the first businessman. It went like this. The last of the kings and emperors all gathered as the gods began to fall around them. The ichor drained from those with mandated rule of heaven and so on. They needed a plan. One king spoke to the other, asking how they'd get through this. The king replied, of course, and smiled. He had faith in their advisor. And yet the advisor stood atop the precipice of everything, atop the mound of piling lord bodies and duchess skulls, and that advisor placed a top hat upon his head and spoke. "I've sold my soul for $100, and you should too." But before the kings could do so, all their shares were gobbled up by their advisors, and thus kings were no more, and businessmen reigned. There once was a world just like ours. In it sat all the factories and investors you could ever dream of. The children worked, smiles on their faces, cheeks stained with grease. They loved to play, and the capitalists loved their smog and steel, so it stayed that way. Until a hole in reality swam through its solar system and threatened to break up the party, but the businessmen only grinned, and asked the Rip if it needed anything. The Rip answered as only it could, speaking of its hunger. The bottomless pit in the businessman's stomach began to gurgle and retch with laughter. And the last words spoken on that world were, "Let's make a deal." There are things here. I am unsure of how to describe them, other than to say they are the only truly native species to the Wonderland. The tale I wish to tell you today concerns one. Its name was childhood. It awoke one morning in a sudden embrace on the waves. Parenthood, its dualed parts rolling into one and spawning forth its form. It yawned, and with a golden roar began to stumble around this new world to itself, toddling, shifting, growing, but never growing up. It smiled, and laughed, and cried. One morning, on a particularly warm day, childhood wandered away from its family, and it watched the waves lap the beach over and over. It hugged itself before it let its hands fall to its side and began to run. Faster and faster childhood sprinted down the coast, with each footfall bringing forth wonder, glee, emotionality to this place. It colored in those lines up to the sky. Then it slammed right into a boy standing on the beach, watching the waves. They tumbled to the ground, cushioned by the sand. Both children smiled as they looked at one another. The sound of laughter floated over the wind as mother and father found childhood with a new friend. They invited the misplaced child Sky into their home for dinner. He very much obliged, eager to spend time with childhood, and so they ate, and for a time childhood had a very good friend. But of course, over time people age. Sky grew and changed, leaving the company of mother, father, and his best friend childhood. It cried that day. It was of its nature to be saddened and embraced by its parents. This weight of grief for the first time began to break down the wonder that made up childhood's form. In the arms of its family, they all agreed to protect one another. And with that, family was fused together into one. They had spent what felt like 1,000 years in that state, until a girl washed up on the shores of that beach where they dwelt. She was stained with black soot in her hair and dark machine grease on her arms up to the elbow. The water that touched her began to flow wrongly. It began to leak oil from her dress and swirl around her in hungry tendrils. But on that day, family reached down, knelt by the side of the girl, and gently fished her from the grasp of the ocean. They had dinner that night, and the girl, who told family her name was Lily, said very little, though she ate with such ferocity and gratitude it caused a crack in the fused form of family. Each quick bite from the girl strangely stretched out from her, pressing into that crack. When she got halfway through the meal, family was nearly broken apart, ready to accept its role as a protector once more. But before it could fully chip and shatter, it glimpsed something. A black smudge across her eyes, a cloudiness that couldn't be explained simply with fog or sleep deprivation. Then it fell apart into its pieces. Childhood took Lily out to the beach that morning. Noticing that Lily had already been up, looking out the window, it asked how long she had been awake. To which she only replied in a cold tone, "For hours." As they played, it noticed that every time it threw a ball to Lily's left, she winced and caught with her right. It noticed that every time she stepped in the water, a cloud of soot fell from her ankles into the ocean, making it shift in a sickly way. But she was kind, and Childhood had been needing a friend, so they stayed, playing for hours, until Lily asked Childhood where work was. Not understanding, it looked at her, confused. Lily spoke of a factory where she had worked, innocently explaining that she'd needed to work in order to sleep, and that mother and father may be cross if they didn't work. Childhood simply said that they did no work, and that they just wished to play in the sand and surf all day. Lily smiled, but there was still that thing lurking within her, so Childhood averted its eyes. They played for a few weeks, dancing across the beach, providing care for Lily, feeding her ravenous appetite, washing her ever-stained black hands, allowing her to rest and take gentle naps in the breeze. She got accustomed to it, as much as she could, and for a time, Childhood could almost not see that thing within her. Until the night of Hallows' Eve. Time does not work quite the same in the Wonderland, but needless to say, a world such as this cherishes the opportunity to dress up in different costumes and express itself in that ever-orange, colorful manner. It was pumpkin carving day, to help the spirits of this place coalesce and take shimmering, dancing forms for all. They began with quite large knives and several pumpkins, each in the hand of a member of the family, and Lily. It was a lovely time of friendship and delight, with the spooky mood with all that fake spider's web and various ghostly decorations bringing together the idea of the coming night of fun. Earlier in the day, the family carved those pumpkins. It was a wonderful time. Until Lily got too ambitious. She cut her hand upon the blade of her knife, and what flowed from within her wasn't just blood, but grease and sickly congealed plastic. That ooze of ichor, sweat, and tears began to flow from her wound, grossly reaching down to the floor of the hut. Mother and father, knowing what a human girl's blood looks like, quickly found a bandage for Lily. But Childhood frowned, for it remembered just why it couldn't make eye contact with Lily all those weeks ago. This was not her blood. It was the blood of the thing inside her. The night of Hallows' Eve itself was a brilliant moment on the nearby town, a festival of all spirits that Childhood, Mother, Father, and Lily all traveled to. They all wore bedsheets to dress up in traditionally ghostly attire. Treats and tricks were handed out ad nauseum for a long while. Childhood stood arm in arm with Lily and pranced along the beach town, deeply feeling the love of that community. But it noticed that every time Lily made contact with a person, it stained their hand black. It was at the edge of town that they stopped and stared. Mother and father were nowhere to be found, going to see some friends, and the children peered over into that dark factory. It had long been since decommissioned, but tonight, of all nights, the orange glow of a furnace flared deep within its walls. and the heat of that boiler could be felt from outside the steel frames making up the building. Lily strolled right toward it, fearless. Childhood could sense its body start to writhe and wrinkle in fear. It could feel that thing watching it, but it could not seem to tell where from. So it just anxiously walked with Lily toward the open mouth of the factory. Once inside, Childhood grasped closely at its anchor to normalcy and reality. It smiled as the joyful gaze of Lily met its eyes. Then it saw the thing, in full, rising from within Lily. Her eyes began to shine like gold. Her hands moved back to reveal all those black, grimy stains upon Childhood's bed sheet. It started to run away, fear ruling over its mind completely. But Lily only began to grin ear to ear, her mouth physically cracking and shifting open. And the noise. The gurgling, clanking noise that erupted from within her and the factory began to ring out all around that city. But Childhood did not know that, for it was lost within the walls of the factory. Lily hugged herself as she continued to transform. A blackened halo of smog and dust formed above her. Her lips shone a shade of red and her skin glistened like cheap plastic. Then she started to move. Childhood could feel it. The noise of 1,000 machines grinding all innocence to dust. It could sense that dark force of labor and stress begin to crush all leisure from its gentle life. It pressed against the cold railings of the catwalk overlooking the vats of boiling oil beneath. It saw Lily stand in front of it, completely normally. It reached out toward her, her face stricken with a flat indifference. And that is what they remembered most of all. She did not look at Childhood with hatred. She did not peer into its face with disgust. She merely looked at it with full ambivalence. It simply slipped through the gaps. Childhood slipped backward, through the bars, and it sank, deep into a tank of oil. Childhood sank into the maw of hegemony. Please remember to rate and review Wormhole Wonderland wherever you listen to podcasts. Wormhole Wonderland was created, written, and produced by Win Oates, with music by Dummis and Caleb Mazzota. Visit our website down below by Webmaster Callum, and visit our Discord. Thank you for listening to Wormhole Wonderland.